Okay, cool. Hi, this is B. This is the Be Illuminated podcast. And today I'll be talking to my friend and circle sister, Julie. Say your last name.
Eberhart.
Eberhart. I always want to say Eberhart. Julie Eberhart. And Julie, it's been 10 plus years since Julie has recovered from vegetarianism, along with a 2-decade journey to redefine physical therapy into a much more holistic viewpoint versus a myopic view. She integrates somatic awareness, hermetics, and body work into her daily life, and those she helps to move more easily again. And I can tell you, as someone who has worked with Julie and also been worked on by Julie, she's amazing. If you can get her hands on, go for it. And if not, she does work at a distance, which all of her contact info will be in the show notes. But Julie, if you want to start out by telling us how to get in touch with you, that would be amazing.
Absolutely. The best way, easiest way is email. M as in Mary, T as in Tom, B as in boy, MTB therapies @gmail.com.
Cool.
Or you can go onto our website, which actually is in reconstruction, mindthebodytherapies.com.
All right. So this is my first recorded episode of the Be Illuminated podcast and the Be Illuminated YouTube channel. So I'm super excited that Julie agreed to do this. We've known each other since 2012 when we met. It's been almost 9 years, right? It'll be 9 years and just on like the weekend of 12/12. Remember, it was 12/12/12, right? When our circle started, and people were like, the world's going to end and the spaceships are going to land and all of the things were supposed to happen. And there were just all of these cool dates right in there. And so we met in the first weekend of a shamanic priestess process with the rest of our amazing circle sisters. And we had such a great circle. And Julie and her wife, Allie, and I got really close as we went through that process. And I am forever grateful.
Me too. Absolutely. Everybody else there seemed to be much more dialed in than myself. I kind of just happened into the circle, but it was absolutely life-changing.
I had no idea what I was doing there.
No, neither did I. But it was magical.
Well, so it's great. Life-changing, transformative for sure. Mm-hmm. So Julie, to start out with the let me find my little base. Oh, wait, they're down here. My very basic questions that I want to ask you are, what are your preferred pronouns?
She, her.
She and her, okay.
Yeah. Julie, go by that out.
That's a proper noun.
Right.
I'm B. I'm also, my preferred pronouns are also she and her. Where are you located? Where in the world are you located, if you want to share?
Arden, North Carolina, more generally Asheville area.
Cool. And can you tell me a little bit about your heritage or your lineage, like what your blood ancestors were like? Where were they from?
For most of my life, I knew that I had some German, some Welsh, some English, and then some other things just sprinkled in there. Interestingly, I went on to Ancestry.com, did the mouth swab, did everything. 50% German. I was like, all right, cool. Now I know why I love potatoes. But
you
then,
know a little funny thing?
Yeah.
Potatoes were not introduced to Europe until the late 1500s by Sir Walter Raleigh. They're actually an American indigenous food crop.
Well, that's how I introduce that. There's a great answer to one of the questions. I'll bring that up later.
Okay.
But then Ancestry.com, they updated their stuff, and now I'm 0% German. So with the last name Eberhart, I'm not sure where that German lineage is. My father got across the pond when he was doing our ancestry work. And it didn't get any further. So I'm still curious where that German part went to, because there is German heritage. That's just a side note.
interesting that it's changed that much. That's pretty fascinating.
Strange.
Okay. And the next one, just for your intro, is where feels like home to you? Like, where in the world do you feel most at home?
That's a super interesting question. And I thought a lot about that because people associate a place with their home. I associate where I am in my body. How am I feeling? And where I am, where I put my head to sleep is home. I did a lot of moving around as a child and as an adult. And I kind of settled into wherever I was home. And we're now in a situation of having to move our place that we're sleeping because of some home renovations. And no matter where we are, we've been in a hotel, Airbnb, that is home. I don't necessarily have a place in the world. It's more of an area. It's not a suburb. It is either a city or in the deep woods is my preferable place. And our home that we have happens to have about an acre of land. We're surrounded by trees within a suburb. So it's this interesting balance that we have. But I feel at home wherever I lay my head.
Do you feel like that might be a result of all of the body work that you do, all of that attention to really being and becoming at home in your body?
I think it is. I think the external search that we have for things like happiness, peace, being at home, is really one of the hermetic laws from within, from without. And if we are within feeling at home and peaceful and joyful, our surroundings match that. We will be naturally drawn to the places that support what we're feeling inside.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I love that. I mean, for me, this was a really surprising answer, and I think it's so cool that you like have brought something so different and so kind of surprising in right from the very beginning. So I love that. You're always a surprise though. So okay. So we're going to get down into the meat of the questions now. Did you have an order that you wanted me to ask these questions in?
No, however it flows the best, I think would be good. This is really exciting. Thank you for allowing me to be the first.
Yeah, yay. So let's go with what is your favorite childhood food memory? Like, what food created a somatic pathway in which your body remembers the ecstatic feeling associated with that moment or those moments?
It's got to be popcorn. I was at my grandma's house, was always asking the question about home. Being at my grandma's was always home for me. She just had that all-encompassing loving hug and comfort in her space. But it was popcorn. And it was always at night, and it was always buttered and salted perfectly. It was made on the stovetop. And so I find myself, when I'm needing that comfort, that feeling of home, I recognize I'm eating a lot more popcorn. It becomes a dinner, it becomes a snack. It'll be, the dinner the day of, and then the snack the day after if I have some left over. You have that crunchy, you have that buttery, silky flavor of the butter, balanced with the salt. It's a perfect vehicle for butter.
It is. And I mean, there's the fat and all of it. It's so good. I think my daughters will probably have a similar memory. They love my popcorn. It's made on the stove, like you said, like it's good stuff.
It is good stuff.
So your grandma made this popcorn.
She did. And I knew that it was real special because she always talked about her lack with finances. And butter is essentially expensive.
Mhm.
Popcorn isn't, right? It's like $1 and change, but butter's like $4, $5, $6 for a pound, depending upon what you're buying.
Mhm.
And for her, that was part of a luxury. So I knew she was sharing part of herself that was really special.
Was your grandma an adult during the Depression?
Uh, I would imagine so. Well, she did go through depressive years
No, the
within.
Great Depression in the United States.
I know I'm trying to think back dates, and I don't have those dates in my head.
Okay. Just interesting because thriftiness was really important to people who survived the Great Depression, right? Like, I remember my grandma washing her paper towels and rinsing them out and hanging them on a little clothesline to dry. She washed her tinfoil and saved it. Like, these were just thrifty things that she did because she knew how to save a penny because there weren't many to spend.
Right.
So,
So my grandfather owned some businesses. They were of money. So whether I imagine that she was an adult during the Depression. I just get stuck on dates, so I
right.
apologize.
Okay, no worries.
But so he lost his business. She went through 2 divorces with him and obviously 2 marriages. So there were those moments of her life where she needed to be thrifty all on her own. But no, during the Depression, I don't believe that she was affected, but I never asked her those questions. Now I wish I would have.
Yeah, not everyone was deeply affected by it, but most people were.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go on to another question. Let's go with this one. I kind of like this question. So I posted on my Facebook at the beginning when I was sort of conceptualizing what I would ask people. I asked my Facebook friends, what would you ask? What questions would you ask? And somebody said, do you have directions back to the mothership? And I was like, this is a great question. And the way I heard this question is, how do we go home from here? How can a humanity living in today's world find a place of ease, succor, and safety in the midst of a frenzy of digitality, dissociation, consumerism, overconsumption, and capitalism gone wild? And really, at its core, this is about coming home to our bodies.
Yeah. Which is where you find home. And that's really a somatic experience. That's the body experiencing that peace and ease. Most recently, I I've been more acutely attuned to posture and the micro changes that can affect essentially pain or ease in the body. And when one of those micro changes is the tongue, when the tongue protrudes forward, our heads go forward. We shut down that vagus nerve and our breath diminishes, which creates a panic response up in the head. Hence the searching response. I need this, I need that. I want the electronics, the electronics and gadgets and all the things that I want, the renovated bathroom, or let's redo all the furniture, like that need to change things out. We're looking, I think, essentially for the change from within. And if you think about the tongue protruding out, right, we actually have to learn to bite our tongues or find our pause, find our breath, bringing the tongue back and allowing things to settle back down with that breath. And then you're finding that somatic home again, which relieves, I think, in my head, the need for all the things. And it's been interesting. As I said, we've been moving from place to place, and we had really stocked up on food during the early stages of COVID. And I'm seeing how little we actually need in the pantry to make so much abundance. Like a can of beans for 3 people, we're going to have leftovers in our taco salad that we made. We have another meal there. So a whole can of beans for maybe 5 meals. Very, very little for very, very much. And it's interesting. We've expanded in our society. And now with this COVID thing, right, we've shrunk back to our home and our space. And things are opening back up. So it's this ebb and flow, kind of a cranial sacral system within ourselves too. So it's this interesting mirror of the external, of the internal. How is our posture? How are we feeling? And how do we minimize to come back and feel
So
good
I'm
again?
feeling a little lost. So how do we, so you're talking about coming home to your body. And I think what you're getting at is really about recognizing the difference between want and need, and offering some actual physical ways that you can shut off that, oh my gosh, I need to purchase this piece of home decor. Like for me right now, I'm getting every Christmas catalog on the planet. I don't know why, but I do. And I opened one up last night. There were all of these cool little like Christmas, they look like snow globes, but they're not. And they have little lights in them and little scenes inside. I was like, oh my God, they're so pretty and they glow. And, I'm going to spend $500 ordering these things, which is utterly ridiculous, and literally, like if you relax, step back, do some vagal breathing, move your tongue, or I move my tongue back in my head, that will literally shut off this desire pathway to have more things that I really don't need, really don't need, and come back home into the body, really to settle in here.
Yeah, it's that want versus need. And it's that we can feel it within. How forward am I? How back and aligned am I? Is this aligned for me to go and purchase? Or do I want it for fun? And there's nothing wrong with fun and wanting. But what's the tipping point?
Yeah. Are you feeling a void with it that's an emotional void, or are you buying something really because it's going to be cute on the, I don't know, the table in your kitchen or whatever?
On the mantle table, whatever. And then an example of this is I studied a long time for my personal training certificate. And as a celebration, I bought the iWatch, the Apple Watch. It's a cool gadget. And I wanted a cool gadget. So I used it as motivation in a lot of different ways. So was it a cool gadget that motivated me? Definitely. Did I need it for motivation? Not necessarily, but it made that motivation easy. So it was easy to say, okay, yes, I'm going to go ahead and purchase this, because it was at that teeter-totter of want versus need. I could have got a much cheaper watch and had that need fulfilled, but I went with the celebratory feeling from within for it.
Mm-hmm. I hear you. We live in this world, right? And we're not all minimalists. Like I love looking at people's minimalist homes, but I am just not a minimalist. I love books. I love some little doodads, not piles of them, but some. It's just not my jam, but more power to people who love that. It is very, I understand it. It's very freeing to not have all of the stuff sitting around and weighing you down, and because it does create sort of a mental weight when you have piles of stuff. But also, like, we live in this world in order to work and make an income and pay the mortgage and the electric bill and all of these things that the vast majority of us have to do, right? We need to be connected in some way. And for you doing what you do, like, fitness is a huge part of your life. And working on other people's bodies is also a huge part of your life. You're so connected in to the actual physicality of the human body. And of course, you need a little gadget to help you keep track of all of the things that you're doing. I have a Fitbit, or it was a gift from my daughter, and it's fun. Like, I can track how much water I drink in a day and how many calories I'm eating. Not that that keeps me from eating. You know what I'm saying?
I know.
I'm plump and I'm going to probably stay that way. But, you know, yeah, it's not something you should feel guilty about, but thinking about it first, like having an actual, instead of the impulse thing, to have an actual mental process around making purchases is smart.
Yeah, will it support me
Mm-hmm.
in a variety of different ways, for me is important. And then my mom, she read something, I think it was in a magazine, maybe it was a book, and when she was looking at moving here to Hendersonville, and now she's back in Columbus, Ohio, but she asked herself, do I love it? And would I buy it today, when she was downsizing? And I thought, that's interesting, because Allie and I have been going through this process of reducing what we have in the house and having just what we love. And there were many things I was holding on to because they were my grandmother's, or there was some connection to ancestry, or I made this Christmas ornament back in 1975. Well, great, but I don't love it. I made it and I wouldn't buy it. So I'm going to let it go.
Mm-hmm.
I'm done with it. I've had my time with it. It's finding that.
Yeah, that whole Marie Kondo thing where, you know, she makes you do your piles, like, it brings me joy. It's going to the thrift store, it's going in the trash, right? Like, that really is important. And I've gone through similar to what you're talking about. Like, I have to look at things and say, okay, this was my mother's, but this is not actually my mother. I can let this go. Like, I don't have to keep this ugly ass black dress for the rest of my life just because it belonged to mom. And maybe someday I'll wear it when I'm 70 or 82 or whatever. But no, because when I'm 70 or 82, I'm going to still like this boho hippie stuff that I like, and not that black dress. Like, I'm not going to change that much. So it's the whole thing, like that clinging to heritage items and releasing them. But really, I think we're sort of straying. So let's bring it back. I'm going to ask you another question.
Sure.
And this is your sacred work toward healing humanity and the planet. So how do you see your work in the world, whether that is your myofascial release, your physical therapy, working on the farm with the CSA that you've done for the last year or two? How does one or more than one of those things help heal humanity and the planet?
Well, I think it all brings us back to home. And as the prior question, back to mothership, how do we get back to self? Our mothership is us, we are mothership, and it all brings us back. The body work, when we're soft and we're open, or vulnerable, and in a power sense of vulnerability, not the trauma sense. I think it has ripple effects. And we
You
can,
know, that's such a great quote right there. When we're soft and open and vulnerable, not in the trauma sense, but in the what sense? What was it you said?
in the
In the
power sense.
power sense. Yes. That's such an important distinction to make, Julie, because vulnerability, like little children who are physically abused, are vulnerable in a really frightening way. But vulnerability is also so important to healing the trauma that we experience through being vulnerable to it, like bringing the power back to that. Wow, I love that.
Absolutely. It's like when you go for a walk in the park, right? And you don't know the people around you. And from a very open space, when you pass someone, you either choose to make eye contact, say hello, or dart your eyes away and say hello, or dart your eyes away and say nothing. I find myself more looking at them so that they know they're seen and saying hello and not worrying if I get it back, because I don't know how that will hit them later that day. Maybe they're out in the park because they're feeling lonely and they have enough human contact and enough isolation that feels safe, just walking on their own. You just don't know how you're going to affect someone. And we see that over and over again on social media. You get cut off by someone. You can choose to flip them the bird, or you can choose just to say, all right, I got you. You're okay. I gave you room. When we take that big step back, I think that's how all of these things are coming together that will bring us home to the mothership and to ourselves, and to heal a lot of the injuries that have occurred, that are ancestral, it's in the land. And I think that's how we start to heal. When we bought the property that we're on, Allie consciously and I consciously, we took stones on all four corners of the property, which isn't exact corners, oddly enough. And we created the healing environment within our property.
That's funny. We haven't ever talked about this, I don't think, but I've done that. Martina and I did it, and we went around and we placed the rocks and we sang them to life and created a grid. And Mark was hunting that day. That Mark's my husband, and he came home and went to bed and got up the next morning. And the next morning he said, I had the weirdest dream that you put crystals all around the house and that they all lit up. And then there was like a teepee or a pyramid of light over and under the house that kept the house safe. And I was like, okay, that was not just a dream, that actually happened. So yeah, crystal gridding is amazing stuff. I'm hoping that Allie will come on and maybe talk about that a little bit. But yeah,
On the journey.
So your sacred work healing the humanity is healing us. So let's be more specific, like your specific work. You're working on a person's body, or you're working with your hands in the dirt. Like, I really am curious about the farming, even though that's not necessarily a career thing for you. But when COVID started, can we talk about this? What happened when COVID started and you had to close your practice down and you started selling plants, right? You were like, we need an income, and everybody's gardening. And
yeah, it was a really scary time, because having elderly family who didn't necessarily wear a mask when they were out and about, I didn't want to bring anything to them. I didn't want to be in a hospital environment or stuck in a 10 by 10 room without airflow, not knowing, having any information. So we stepped way back, farmed at a CSA, and that was healing upon itself, working with the dirt, knowing that the plants that I grew would nourish somebody. And so we planted, we harvested, and I helped to box a CSA, and I helped to sell the vegetables at a farmer's market. And the owner, Nicole, she would giggle at me sometimes because I would be walking down the rows, looking and talking to the plants. Do you want to go to the CSA or do you want to go to the farmer's market? Like each leaf of Swiss chard, of kale, each beet, I was really found myself being really conscious of, are you ready to be picked today? No, you want another day. Okay, we'll pick you tomorrow. Who wanted to go and who didn't? And part of me knew with that energy, I was giving love to that next person, right? It's the water of, who is that dude? Ayamoto with the water and the microscope. I think that was in the book.
Emoto.
Yes.
Emoto, yeah.
I knew that my vibration of consciousness and love when I was harvesting went into the food that I gave to or sold to the people. And it was so expansive. And I went to my stepmom's and dug plants and potted them up and watered them and babied them for maybe a week and put them up on Facebook. And they went like a New York minute. Lowe's was closed. I had a soul audience. It was fabulous. We got fed. My soul was nourished, and I made some money. We paid our mortgage and all the bills through that time without me having to work hard. And my soul was healing from a death in the family also. I couldn't have thought how to make that happen. I simply was led by higher spirit, higher guidance. I couldn't have thought. I could have planned it.
So by doing what you did, you helped so many people who were also stuck at home, right? And wanted to work on their yards and be outside. Like we all went wild with gardening in early 2020, right? Like everybody was doing home improvement and trying to make a space in their backyards that was enjoyable, because instead of going out, we all were staying home. Home suddenly became the focal point for everyone who has a home.
Exactly. So those moments of contact that I had were healing among themselves. It was really important to engage in a way that communicated, we did the best we could to get you the best nourishment for your body.
Yeah.
And when I would do drop-offs and everything, I would often say, because we love you and we are so grateful for your support, we want to support you in this way. And if there were anything wrong, I would say, just give it back to me. I got plenty of extras. We'll just replace it, whatever we got to do.
And now you're back to working on people. And are you doing physical therapy or MFR? Both?
Both, absolutely. And it's that same ideas that we've been coming through this whole thing. Simplicity with that. And I got a huge lesson in that. I was working with somebody privately, and I was giving her a lot of cues to connect into this shifts and changes to decrease her pain. And I went to add in another one. And I said, wait a minute, is this too much? And she said, yeah, it was a foot position and ankle position. And she said, no, this is enough. So I just sat there with the release. But it's, how much is too much? How do I approach each person so that they can feel their own shifts and changes, so they can be at home, so that they can be more conscious and aware of consumerism, of yes, I need the internet to connect through my work, but when do I just go ahead and turn it off?
Yeah, I feel like, the internet has really been great and a lifesaver for the last year and a half. And it's fun and very durable and useful in so many ways, but we're starving for touch. And so to be able to come and see someone who does work like you do in the world and have someone actually appropriately touch us physically and help take care of our body at the same time, it's just amazing. Like that kind of work is just so important to, there's nothing like touch when your nervous system is all like ruffled up and somebody can just come in and put their hands on your body and, do whatever sort of magical things you do with our giant rubber band that encases us. And it's so beautiful.
Well,
It
thank
really
you
is.
very much. It's an honor to do the work. And through COVID, right? Touch all of a sudden became this scary thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting how it can be both. And how do you help to normalize touch again?
Yeah. Yeah.
When for a lot of people, for a long time, it was if they were traumatized by touch, right? They were physically abused, even emotionally can feel like a physical abuse or neglect. They at some point had normalized touch, and then all of a sudden 2020, now almost a traumatizing event again, right? We ripped touch away.
Yeah. Don't hug, bump elbows or whatever. There was that whole thing. And it's still like real. We had this huge party that my family's company does every year, and there are hundreds of people there. And I was like, I'm sorry, I'm not hugging anybody. We can do a fist bump or I'll shake your hand, but that's it for me for today. And I ran into someone yesterday at a different event that was not nearly as big, much more intimate. And I was like, okay, we can hug today. And he was like, oh, okay, cool. So just in this changing landscape of, am I safe? Am I not safe? And, if I catch this illness, am I going to give it to my elderly father and kill him? Like we're always being hyper aware of this and having to balance our need for touch with our, I don't know, awareness of disease and also concern for who we might then spread it to. It's a whole big thing. It really is an unanswered question.
Yeah, it's forced us into a higher level of consciousness. And those who can't do it chose to exit. I think are still choosing to exit this 3D world that we're in here. And if they go back to mothership, that's where they go. Who knows where their spirit goes? And even that's probably a conscious choice, right? How do we get there? Are you consciously choosing and doing the things to help you get there?
Yeah. I don't know that I think that everybody who's chosen to stay is particularly conscious, but maybe some of us have gained in consciousness. So let's move on to the last question, which for people like Julie and I is probably the most challenging one, which is how do we become indigenous to place, lowercase I, indigenous, without appropriating? And Julie and I had a little conversation about this before I started the recording, because we are the descendants of people who colonized this country. And so even the assumption that we can become indigenous to place is maybe impossible, right? Like maybe that's not something we can actually do. And therefore, we're never going to be indigenous to anywhere because our people chose to leave the place where we were indigenous to and to come here and to take this land away from the people who lived on it. And so learning how to live in a world with the awareness of the way the land that we lived on was taken and acquired by our ancestors, and being very specifically aware of how we live on the land and how we connect to the land that we live on. Because here we are, like we're not all wealthy enough to just pack up and leave and go back to Ireland or Wales or wherever it was our families came from. You know, it's just not feasible. So we need to be sensitive to the cultures that were here before ours, and also aware that here we are, we're not going anywhere. So how do we make the best of the fact that we're here, that we've landed here, and that our homes are here in whatever place we've arrived?
It is a tough question, but the more that you talk about it, I'm getting a little bit of some clarity. When we first moved here, I took a hospital job, small hospital, and a lot of the people, one would have used the term redneck or backwoods. And I think that's just another word for Appalachian, right? We're right on the Appalachian Trail, and there's a lot of really depth of culture here, really beautiful.
Redneck's actually a word for a blue collar worker, somebody who's outside all the time working with their head down because their neck gets sunburned. And it's really sort of related to farmers for the most part, men on tractors all day.
Right.
So it's not just Appalachian, it spans the nation from the coastal plain to through all the way through the Great Plains and all the mountains out to the coastal plain on the left coast.
True. And I guess I was using it as a negative kind of, and yes, you are correct.
It does have negative connotations because, you know, redneck also means people who are rude and drink beer and don't have manners and, you know, all kinds of other things.
So there was, I was greatly aware of how the depth of the culture here in the mountains was very ingrained, and I was very much an outsider and knew that it was going to take me years to even feel, to have a sense of home here. So my home became more important. Go ahead.
And that culture was an overlay over the original culture that existed in those mountains, right? Because the white people who live there, you know, they're the descendants of the people who took the land from the Cherokee.
Right. So even being more sensitive to taking more from the land. And Allie and I were very keenly aware of the construction and how the mountainsides were being degraded because people wanted to live on a cliff, which to me doesn't seem as smart because we had mudslides. And we were very conscious that we wanted to rehab a home in a way that was giving back, in a way that felt healing. So we bought a 1930s farm home that will probably never be done renovating, windows, siding, all of that. But it was a super conscious decision. And then bringing in food. Food is a huge piece of culture. When I was little, my mom's cornbread, she would always say it's an Appalachian cornbread because it's skillet. So I love skillet cornbread. I don't like the cake cornbread, but the thin, crispy skillet. So it's allowing, I think, the place that you are to accept you.
That's funny. I was reading a Facebook post from my friend Lucy, who lives in Fines Creek, which is on off of 40 between Asheville and Knoxville, right? And she was talking about she liked to make her Aunt Jetty's cornbread, and Aunt Jetty taught her to grease the wood cook stove, and not even to put it in a skillet, but just to cook it on the surface of the wood stove. She would just lightly oil the surface of the wood stove and cook it right on that wood stove. And Lucy's family goes back many generations in the mountains there. And so you're talking about Appalachian cornbread, and like literally I just read that this morning about her aunt's cornbread, which would have been 50 years ago when she was cooking it.
Yeah, yeah. And certainly you could get some thickness to it, you know, that the pan gives it, but it's similar concept. But
She's making little like pancakes,
yeah,
not a full skillet full.
yeah. Wow.
Anyway,
I think
talk
it
about
is.
your house.
Talk about our house.
Talk about your house.
We have just about an acre of land, mostly flat, that during COVID, we decided that, all right, let me back up. Pre-COVID, our business was growing, and we were kind of in this, on this teeter-totter of, do we keep our home? Because it is big property and the house needs a lot of rehab. Or are we so busy with the business that we can't attend to the home like it should be attended to? So we were on this fence. COVID hit, decision was made. We expanded the garden, brought in some berry bushes, some other fruit trees, got chickens, created a better herb garden. It still needs work, but it's better than what it was. And just decided, no, this is where we belong. In this area, this is our home here. So we've just adapted our uses of our property so that we're just not running the lawnmower on it, wasting gas. We're using our resources, composting, chickens, all of it.
But you're not composting your chickens, you're composting
No.
and you have chickens.
Yes. Although the chickens are eating the compost. So the compost really is the chicken food.
They're turning it for you. They're so friendly about stuff like that.
They really are. They're good with that, aren't they?
Yes. So you've really changed the face of that piece of land that you had over the time that I've known you, from what was essentially sort of a bit of a wild and woolly yard to a place now where you have gardens, where you're growing some perennials, where you're growing a vegetable garden. You hope to have bees there soon. You have chickens, but you can't free range them now because you have a coyote
And a hawk.
and a hawk.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a whole thing. In the suburbs especially, the predators are looking. They have more access to food there, so they're coming in and hunting. But
And it's a beautiful cycle of life.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, we're still getting the eggs, so we still have the chickens, and we help the hawks live.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they became more pets, so it was very sad. We've named them the Golden Girls, but you know, it is the absolute circle of life.
Indeed. We have now installed raptor netting over our chickens. So we occasionally have to go out and free a blue jay, which is not fun. But so far we haven't lost any more. Now that we have the electric poultry netting and then the raptor netting over the top, we're doing okay. Okay, so is there anything else that you want to say? Anything that has popped up that you just feel like this is the moment?
No, I was hesitant of doing this a little bit because I wasn't really sure how to answer the question. So my hopes is that I brought something new to all of your lives and had food for thought, and would love to see what the continued discussion looks like in the comments below. I would love to be a part of that, any clarification that needs to happen.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate you. I hope to see you soon. And so this is, again, Julie Eberhart here with me today, and you can find all of Julie's contact info in the show notes, which will be posted below the YouTube video and available on my website at beilluminated.love or bepriestess.love. So keep your eyes open for that. If you're interested in reaching out to her for body work or for a consultation online, you're welcome to do that. And if you're interested in learning more about my work, just go to the websites I just shared. So thanks again, Julie. I love you, and I hope to see you soon. And thank you so much.
Thank you. Much love.
All right. Thank you.